We've talked a lot about sales, talked a lot about marketing. Now let's talk about the people who build the product. I think that sales and marketing has its own challenges, but scaling a company into that 10 million, that 100 million in revenue is a difficult challenge, not only on the sales side, but you have to probably evolve the product. And definitely want to be able to dive into that into each of these different companies. But maybe even before we go there, could each of you give just a minute on your current role, a little bit about your company, and if it's helpful and you can share a little bit about where the company was in size when you started and where is it today?
Cool. I'm Sam Boonin. I run product strategy at Zendesk. Joined the company 5.5 years ago. We were 125 people and about 15 million in revenue. 15. Now we're the 300 and something million and 1,600 people. I ran the product team for the first 3 years. Now I'm running product strategy, which is 25% really cool strategy stuff and 75% product ownership for everything that's shared, which is cool stuff like the developer platform and the data platform and the trial user experience and mundane but super important stuff like accounts and logins and user service and billing and search and things like that.
Great.
Cool. I'm GAURAV Gupta, so I'm the VP of Product at Elastic. We're the company behind open source products called Elasticsearch, Logstash, Kibana. So I'm responsible for product management and product marketing at the company. I joined about 3 years ago. It was about 70 people. Now we're about 500. Prior to that, I was at a company, a commercial company in a similar space called Splunk, where I was there for 5.5 years. We were about 100 people when I joined and over 1,000 and went public during that process.
And maybe just, Gaurav, how big was Splunk when you joined and then when you left?
Yeah, about 100 when I joined and over 1,000 when I left. Yeah.
Revenue-wise?
Oh, I don't remember exactly. It was a while ago. But, we were public, so, it was in a couple hundred million in revenue.
Got it.
Yep.
Chris?
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris and I'm head of product at Box. So Sam and I have a very similar career trajectory. We were both at Box. I was at Box about 5.5 years ago as well. We were under 20 million in revenue. Today, about 400 million in revenue, something like that. We had about 200 people. Today, about 1,500. So my background is a little bit more platform-oriented. I used to run the developer programs at Yahoo before coming over. So Aaron and I first started working on platform, and then I did platform about a year or so before I took over product, and I've been running product and platform since then. So it's been a fun ride.
Yeah, great. So, it sounds like we have a great set of folks that have had fantastic stories. We're from 15 million to 300, maybe tens to hundreds all around the table. But, it's pretty clear that the journey to that 100 million and beyond isn't always a straight line. Ooh, can you guys hear me? Okay. Just curious, when you think back to the period of growth that was most challenging, why was that, and what are the key learnings behind it? Maybe Sam, you can give a little bit of that, of what was really, really hard at the time from the product perspective.
Every, like people were saying this morning, it's pure unadulterated pain the entire journey, but it looks good from the end. I think when I first came in, I was super excited. I was like, job of my career, coming in this super hot growth company. The 6 months before I got there, we launched an iPhone app, an iPad app, an integration with Twilio to offer our own voice product. We launched analytics. We launched our first enterprise plan, which included like roles and permissions and audits and stuff like that. And I was just amazed as I was interviewing there, like this velocity is incredible, right? I'm going to come in here, I'm going to run a team, I'm going to release all this shit completely, right? And what I came into was that we had pushed so much feature debt in some sense, right? And everything we released was well adopted. So at the time we had probably 10,000 customers, and then every feature would get like 300, 400, 500, 1,000 customers were using it. And the challenge was that, if you take like our voice product, or Twickets, which is our Twitter integration, a developer had built that over 2 weeks, right? But to scale that out to 10,000 customers required an entire Scrum team. So the first year and a half was like putting entire teams on features that we had launched to make up for what we had already successfully launched to make sure that it could scale. So that was super challenging. I mean, it turned out to be, money making and the right thing to do, but like it sort of, wasn't what I thought I was getting into, because I thought I was going to be releasing all this awesome stuff. And I realized what battening down the hatches and making features scalable and work well with everything else was super challenging.
Would you say in that particular situation, was that around the 15 million revenue mark?
For us, I mean, that's, the company didn't exist before 15 million as far as I'm concerned. Forget about what Amanda said. Yeah. At least for us it was. I mean, Zendesk was fortunate because we didn't have a struggle to hit product market fit. It almost happened by happenstance. Yeah. So we didn't necessarily have the discipline of being careful about what features we roll out or being careful about what bets we make in the product. So for us, that happened right around that time that I came out, that I came into the company, that we had that sort of, I hate calling it tech debt or feature debt, but where we had to put a lot behind some of the features we already launched.
Got it. A lot on the plate, had to execute against it, hard to scale and make it very tight for consumer offering or customer offering.
Right, yeah.
Got it. Well, and GAURAV, you've been able to see it from Splunk, which is a very large company at this point. You also got to see it from Elastic. What were kind of the key learnings that you had from the biggest challenges at either of those companies?
Sure. To your other question before, I think obviously the hardest part is 0 to 10 million. Getting product market fit's incredibly hard. This is why almost every startup fails, right? But this is a panel about scaling. So I think the next hardest part is kind of going 10 to 40. And that's because you're at this juncture where you do have this product market fit, but you need to go, your sales folks and your marketing folks are saying, where are you going to go next? How are we going to get beyond 10 million? It feels like we're capped out. And you need to make a decision. Are you going to become a platform? Right, and go after a lot of use cases? Are you going to go after a different user? Are you going to be a platform and then build solutions on top of it? And you get into this jumble of this huge matrix of features and things you could do as a company. And it's at that point you're making these critical decisions that actually impact whether you could be a $1 billion revenue company in the future. At both companies, Splunk and Elastic, I remember I was a more junior guy at Splunk, and I remember looking up at the exec management saying, gosh, can't we just focus? It feels like we're doing a zillion things. And funnily enough, now, as I grew up in that company and now I'm at my new company, I have my team telling me, why can't we just focus on one thing? It seems like we're trying to do everything. We're trying to build solutions. We're trying to build a platform. We're trying to go after new users. And one of the things I learned is that actually focus can be a bad thing, because at that stage, you don't actually know what's going to hit, right? You're trying a bunch of things, but eventually you'll land on, for Splunk, it was this platform play, right? That we could be a data platform for many things, and it was only because we tried many different use cases and user types that we figured that out. But you don't know that when you're 10 to 40. In some ways, you sort of have to let things evolve. And sometimes, to be contrarian, you asked me to be contrarian, focus can be a bad thing, right, for a company at that stage. Now, I'm sure there's others who would disagree with me on that.
Interesting. Well, we'll definitely talk a little bit about product market fit, which I think is an interesting topic. But maybe, Chris, give us a sense, in Box's own journey. Dan this morning talked about it being inbound in the early days, talked about selling to small businesses first. How did the product organization face all these challenges in figuring out, like GAURAV mentioned, focus and being able to crystallize where you're going to go?
Yeah. The interesting thing about Box is that Aaron Levy is the CEO, right? And he is a guy who is inherently not focused, just not focused, right? He has a million miles a minute, and if you have a startup today and you guys have a product-oriented founder, you've got the same challenge if you come in as a product leader, is how do you focus all the energy? So here's a really good example. Early on in our history, we saw that Dropbox had a sync product. And so what we said was, we should probably do one of those. And Aaron, I remember the conversation, Aaron's like, that's a piece of cake. We just get a contractor to start working on it, we should be good. So we literally hired a contractor to build our first sync product. 4 years of disaster later, we built our own sync product finally and got it into market. I cannot tell you how much we regret that decision early on. It was because we were moving really quickly. We didn't have enough engineers to do this. We had to do that because that was the Dropbox thing while we did this thing, the enterprise thing. And so we ended up, hurting ourselves in the long run for, I think, years with our customers. And so the challenge of focus and then handling all of the inbound requirements that customers have, it's just overwhelming for product teams when they're really, really young. And it doesn't help to have a founder who's constantly moving back and forth. So your product managers have to be great at managing a founder. So anyway, it's an adventure at that stage. I would say 80 to 100 million almost knocked us over. Just trying to get to that, to that phase. It was rough.
You only had one founder you had to manage in the product team?
Yeah, so the way this works with Box is Dan then knows he stays out of the product areas a little. So basically, Aaron and I drive product where Dan covers sales and marketing, and as the COO, we know where our swim lanes are. So, because there's so much going on at any one time.
Yeah. So it sounds like if if I'm hearing it from you, key learning is manage the founders. Also being able to, I guess maybe opposite is to create a little bit of focus, because when you have too much on the wall, you may be going after too many things too thin. Maybe just switch it a little bit, to the product market fit, because it's, that's a word that I think is overused here in Silicon Valley. We want to find product market fit, but it means a lot of different things to a lot of folks. I think that the closest thing you can define to it is the market kind of wants what you kind of have. But why don't you talk a little bit about, GAURAV, when you talked about the different phase, that 0 to 10 and the 10 to 40, when did you think the company had product market fit?
I mean, the product market fit for a company, I feel like, is almost always evolving because your customer base is evolving. So to a certain extent, joining Splunk and joining Elastic when I did, the companies already had product market fit. That's why I joined them, right? I saw something special going on. They were in sub 10 million, but you could tell by talking to the customers that the products were solving a very acute problem that they were willing to pay for. Now, I would argue that product market fit was limited in nature, in how big the company could get. If we just kept on fulfilling that need, it would be sort of, the company would cap out at 20 or 30 million. So I think the next step is then figuring out how do you evolve it. A lot of times, you'll talk to customers and say, well, what do you want next? The challenge, of course, with that is that almost every customer is taking some other product they've seen and they want you to be exactly like it, right? And so then your product market fit continues to be capped out. So in some ways you have to think about, okay, what is it that the market will want in 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, and adapt for it. So I don't know if I answered your question, but it's this tricky balance of maybe even not listening to your customers sometimes once you get that initial product market fit to see how you could scale bigger.
So it sounds like there's an evolution to product market fit. Is it correct to kind of say that, at least in your experience, there's maybe layers of product market fit that you have to add on top to be able to address the market?
Yeah, I mean, that's how I think about it, yeah.
And it sounds like when you went into Zendesk, it was a great product, but there was a whole bunch of things that you had to be able to implement in terms of strategy and product. From your perspective, what is product market fit, and how were you able to capitalize that when you were at Zendesk?
Yeah, I agree with GAURAV, which what he said is that, product market fit isn't a point, and maybe for, A round and B round investors, it's a point in time where it's like a checkbox in the investment decision. But for my experience, sounds like for yours, it's a series of almost like segment market fit, right? Or whatever, or market set, whatever product segment fit. So from our perspective, I think similar to other companies, we started as an SMB product, almost a VSB product. Lots of very small companies, web try buy model, and we've constantly been moving up market while maintaining our base. And one thing I've noticed with product market fit is that the higher up you go in your segments, the less it's about the product, features and functions and capabilities, and the more it's about a lot of the sort of softer things, right? Whether it's your support model, what your contractual terms look like, what is your sales organization, customer success, implementation, things along those lines. Yet, once the company is once it's a product company, I think we all work for product companies, once we're established as a product company, people turn to the product team to say, give me the features that I need in order to go after, you know, like, we want to go after e-commerce, we need to support PCI, right? And they think about that as encrypting the right fields and passing the right certifications in order to do PCI, but it turns out there's a lot more to it. You know, then we're like, oh, then we build PCI, and then we still don't get the deals. And we're like, hey guys, you told us we build PCI, we get those deals, and not happening. So I think it's, you know, the one thing I've noticed is with product market fit, the higher up you go, the less it's actually about the capabilities of the product. And that makes the product manager's job even harder, because it's not just getting ourselves and our engineers organized, but it's sort of working with, you know, other parts of the company to do it.
Interesting. Kind of the evolution behind it. Well, you know, Chris, maybe just from your perspective, you know, Box lived through many different iterations. You know, Dan said, you know, you have to, when, you know, Box was growing up, it was moving in many dimensions simultaneously. You know, were there any breakthroughs in the product that ended up becoming a big driver for, again, the market wanting to receive what Box was having?
Yeah, for us, so we're an interesting mix, right? Sometimes I say half my team needs to look like they work at Facebook or Google or Twitter, and then the other half needs to look like they come from Oracle or Symantec, right? Because we're addressing end users who have lots of choices around the products they use in the enterprise, and then companies that we have to deal with from a compliance and security point of view. So you have to jam those people together to make it work, and that's not so uncommon these days, right? There's a lot of products that look like that, and so for us, product market fit on the user side tends to be, are we addressing the power user or the marginal user? So we keep thinking about, are you building features that get after that person who has a really deep content or file use case? Or are you getting after the marginal user, somebody who comes into the product on a pretty, you know, maybe sporadic basis, but still gets a lot of value for it? And so for us, product market fit kind of falls in there. The thing that got us moving was when the iPad was released. This was 2010. So this was if you look at 2010 and 11 and 12, this is when a lot of companies were rolling out tens of thousands of iPads to their pharmaceutical sales forces or whatever that was. And almost every company was rolling out iPads. Even today on mobile, over 80% of our paid mobile users are on iPad today, even still today, which is amazing this many years later. So when the iPad came out, that was the first time that we built an ecosystem of iPad integrations. We worked on our iPad app. That made a huge difference. And that was one of the things that really started to settle us into very large deployments where we could put out 10,000 people at a time. And that helped the growth a lot right in that time period.
Great. Well, maybe talk a little bit about that, because you know, it seems like a common theme that we've heard, even from the sales perspective with its own challenges, probably related into how you actually sculpt your product. A lot of the companies that you guys have been involved with started out maybe at the SMB, or maybe started in the mid-market, and then moved up towards the enterprise. How do you think about, as an organization, how do you address being able to simultaneously serve both small business, mid-market, and enterprise? Is that something that you end up having to divide the organization by? How do you make the product decisions behind it? Just curious to get some philosophies or processes behind it.
Or lessons learned.
Lessons learned, yes.
I don't think that we've solved this necessarily at Zendesk specifically. In some senses, we're feature complete, and we've been feature complete in the SMB forever, right? Now, we bought a chat company 3 years ago, which really helped. But, you know, we do everything that small businesses want. Sometimes there are some changes in, you know, channel preferences for consumers reaching out to support. But the challenge I think that we've faced is that there is an insatiable appetite to build for two audiences. The loud customer who makes it very clear what she wants, and this mythical next customer that's going to get us the next level of growth, right? And the challenge I think that we face is, how do we make sure that we stay true to our founding vision of building beautifully simple software, democratizing software, very similar to what Aaron talks about at Box. And I think, you know, so we've organized around sort of the SMB team and the enterprise team. We've organized around features. We're now organized around revenue generating products. But organizing around segments from a product perspective is really hard. But our true north that we try to do it is that we try to introduce everything new in the SMB space. So when we have, you know, our help center, which is our self-service portal, or we build our web widget, which allows you to embed elements of Zendesk into a native web experience. Yeah. All those things, we try to build them first for our alpha consumer, who is a small business, knowing that like if we build it with the complexity the enterprise wants, we lose our advantage against the Salesforces, the Microsofts, and the Oracles. But back to your question, I don't think that we've found the model to make sure that we are true to our roots versus grow to the next, you know, segment we're going after. And that's something that I used to be a lot taller and I used to have a lot more hair. I used to worry about that a lot less, but I worry about that.
Got it. Gaurav, what about you from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, both the companies I've been more on the, call it large enterprise side. At least that's where they started. And frankly, that's where the money was in the early days. It was pretty obvious for enterprise software that you didn't have a lot of salespeople, and that's how you would grow. And in both companies, at Splunk and now even Elastic, we had that conversation like, there's an opportunity to build a funnel at the low end, call it the SMB market, or under 2,000 employees, and it's extremely tough. Because the first thing that everybody says is, well, all we need to do is change the pricing and packaging and remove a few features, and it's an SMB product. And that never works, right? First of all, it's hard to remove those few features, which ones you remove. And you forget that you have to build kind of a new product for a new customer. It needs to be maybe easier to use, cheaper, easier to get started with. It's probably a different audience. And then the conflict comes in is that you do need to invest in the product to build this product for a new market segment, but you're fundamentally trading off resources that would also be building, you know, big features for the enterprise that would drive a lot more revenue in the near term, and you might be public or close to going public. And it's very, very hard to make that trade-off if you're an executive team. So that's why I think it's hard to switch between the two. I'm not saying you shouldn't try. I'm trying, but it's tricky.
Chris, maybe, you know, just to kind of build off of that, you know, how did Box end up deciding how to be able to address these different segments? I mean, was it, you know, that tension that Gaurav actually talks about of, you know, who are you addressing? What's your mission? What's your ultimate long-term addressable market versus near-term revenue, and how that permeates into what you decide in the product? How did that journey work for you guys?
Yeah, so some of working with big customers for us is kind of up the alley of what Sam talked about earlier. It's the softer stuff. So for example, when we got GE as a customer, we used to sit across from the GE CIO every single month in a face-to-face meeting, in what they call a workout at GE. So I don't know if you guys have worked with GE, they call them workouts. Now we know why. You sit in a meeting with them 8 hours and you jam through their requests in your product. That's the hard thing. The problem with big customers is leverage. They have leverage on you because they might be a multi-million-dollar customer versus a small business which might be paying you a few $1,000s. The problem with leverage is that it kind of warps your roadmap. So you can look at features in Box literally and see like, oh, that was Procter & Gamble, that was GE, that was IBM. We probably shouldn't have done that, but we did it for Walmart. And you know, like it's a bunch of stuff that doesn't kind of come together all the time, but you have to resist making those decisions. I think that's the hardest thing about big customers. They try to exercise that leverage, and then you're walking a line because your product manager's like, we can't be jerked around like this. We got to get focused, right? So this is the challenge of serving big customers if you want to serve them.
So do any of you folks, you know, have, you know, there's a lot of startups here in the audience. Some of them probably in that earliest phase, you know, either 5 million, 10 million, 15 million revenue, quickly growing into that next phase. What kind of advice do you give to the product or product leaders to be able to push back or maybe help sculpt the sales force, the product marketing folks, to be able to build the right features for the long term?
Don't read the Lean Startup, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, no, I think it's amazing. Conceptually it's great, but again, you know, MVP has been this, you know, thing on my back for a while. No, I'm kidding.
It's only for 0 to 1, not 1 to 100?
No, we're overgeneralizing. I'm just, you know, trying to be slight. I think from my perspective, customer empathy is a capability that every product manager can learn, and every product manager needs to work on, right? It's very easy to sort of intellectualize the situation and make the right trade-offs and work around the company in terms of what you're doing and listen to, really in a, $0 to $15 million company, it's really the founders that are making the decisions, right? The product managers at that point are really implementing the directions to a certain extent. But I think, being, as corny and stupid as it sounds, being the voice of the customer and really understanding the customer and her journey throughout the entire process is something I think, can help guide the right types of decisions, right? And whether that customer is, the CIO of GE, or if the customer is, runs a small, taco shop or something like that.
I don't know if Gaurav or Chris, you have any advice to push back on?
I mean, I'll add to kind of what he said. I totally agree. I mean, one of the first things I tell product managers that come onto my team is how important it is that they use the product. And it's hard to do in some areas, specifically enterprise software, but I force it on people. And that could mean implementing dog food initiatives. And the reason that's so important is that there's only so much you can get by talking to customers. Like, you almost have to live the problem. You need to go on site. The other thing I do is I ask product managers to do customer support for a couple of weeks. So they live they can almost become the IT person or become the developer for a little while. And what that allows them to do is actually filter through customer feedback and maybe see the big picture. So if they get 10 feature requests, they might be able to then process those 10 feature requests and say, you know what, actually, all these customers are kind of asking for the same thing in a different way. What we need to build is this, application framework that allows them to build on top of us, not do all 10 of those features. And you only get to that realization, I feel like, until you live the product. And, I think that's what you're talking about when you mean empathy.
Got it. So dog fooding, and then also customer support. I mean, that's one where, I think some of the best CEOs, even outside of tech, do every single role within their company to be able to truly empathize with the employees as well as the customers. So that's great advice. So maybe let's switch a little bit to probably, I would say, one of the hardest problems, and you can tell me if it's true or not, is people and hiring. The perception that we have even as investors is anyone who's actually very good at product is either trying to get poached by the Googles, the Facebooks, and make a huge salary, or they actually can become a CEO themselves by, there's a lot of seed funding that's out there. I don't know if you guys agree with that or not, but maybe a specific question is, think back when you first joined, when it was just 50 people or 100 people. How do you hire that rock star product person when they have so many alternatives to go to?
The rock stars were at Zendesk when I joined, so I shouldn't say that. I should take credit for it to a certain extent. At least some of them were. And we've been fortunate, actually, because I've hired outside of product in marketing and sales and other areas. And actually, we've had a relatively easy job in product of hiring. Secret of Zendesk that's not so much it's pretty open secret is that something like 60% of our product development is outside of San Francisco. So we have development centers in Dublin and Melbourne and Copenhagen and France and Singapore. So one way to hire really great talent is to go where Google and Facebook don't exist, right? Or don't exist at the same scale. The second thing I think that we've done a good job of is creating a culture of product at Zendesk. So we interview really well. We have some of our old-time product managers and director-level folks who are like the best interviewers I've ever seen in my career. Thank God they didn't interview me when I came on board because I wouldn't have gotten the job. But I think the biggest thing for us has been, like I said, we're somebody in Melbourne, right? We're somebody in even in Dublin, which is a pretty big tech town, right? Don't tell anybody, we're nobody in San Francisco, right? There's so many jobs here. There's so many product jobs here. There's so many startups that it becomes really hard. But, it is definitely challenging.
Chris, maybe, you've been able to see Box in many years of the earliest years, all through now, hundreds of millions of revenue. what advice could you give startups in getting that rock star product person?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, product management isn't, you don't go to school to learn to be a product manager, right? This is one of those things where most product managers have grown up in an environment where they were an apprentice to somebody else. They learned how to be a product manager from someone else. And so unless you get guys who've gone through like the Google or Facebook APM programs, you don't necessarily have a lot of consistency in product managers. So we made the call a few years ago that we were going to start growing our own APM program internally, where we brought in, there's really high performance folks everywhere in the organization, and we'd interview about 25 of them for each APM position we had open on the team. And then we would choose one or two of them to come into the team every few months or so. And we built a bunch of our early product management bench that way by training. When you go outside to look for people, we pursue the people who have the experience that we need relentlessly. Like I will get on the phone with you anytime to talk to you if we're really, really interested in getting you in. Oh, and that's what you have to do. All of our product and development is here on the third and fourth floors in Redwood City. So we've got, we compete against Facebook and Google all the time. And if we're going to make the decision to go outside the company to hire somebody, we will go after them relentlessly. And that's the only way to get good people in. The only other thing I will say is sometimes we confuse charisma with good product managers. And the challenge there is that sometimes we have people who are great on stage at BoxWorks, and then those same people are not that great from an inbound product management point of view. And for us to figure out how to interview somebody and get past the, hey, this person is pretty charismatic, and get down to, hey, do you really, what characterizes you as a product person? That's a lot harder sometimes when you interview people.
And maybe any tips and tricks, particularly on that, because, the surface of charisma versus the actual strength that they have. Any advice or tools that you use?
Really quick story. I just interviewed a candidate, and I asked him, what characterizes you as a product manager? And he said to me, you know what? I don't know if this characterizes me as a product manager, but I saw something this morning in your lobby that's still bugging me right now. And I said, what is it? He said, I came to your iPad to sign in, and I had the iPad take a picture of me, and then there was a giant button below it that said retake. And I thought, that is stupid. Like, why would I have something? He wanted to find the submit button, right? So the submit button's this little, I had to go down and see it for myself. It's a little right triangle up in the corner, a dark blue right triangle. He said he had to go find it to hit it. And he said, the reason that bugs me is because the person who designed that thought that when I took a picture of myself, to just get myself to come to Box to see you, that my first thought would be to retake a picture of myself. Like that I want that to be perfect. And that bugged me because that's not my use case. I need a picture so I can come see you. And so it bugged me, so I hired him. Because the attention to detail is so important, right? That he paid attention to that detail, and that's the kind of stuff that we really need these days is somebody who gets in and really understands the basics.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but one thing that we do in product, and I was surprised when I went out of product for a couple of years that we didn't do elsewhere in the company, is that we give homework assignments to all candidates before they come in. So, by the second round of interviews, if I have to hear somebody tell me about his resume for the 8th time, I'm going to vomit, right? But it's annoying the way that we typically hire people. We give people homework assignments. Here is a product problem in the area that you're applying for a job. Go do a little bit of research. Don't put in 100 hours. Do a little bit of research and then come in and present it to a team. And then we'll have a good dialogue. And if they're a product person if they do that, right? Number one, we get free consulting. No, I'm kidding. But to give people an opportunity to show a little bit of what they can do and how they would apply their capabilities at Zendesk, as opposed to walking through their resume and sort of charming. Because I agree with what Chris says. Maybe not as much as marketing people and sales people, but product people are pretty confident and are very good at marketing and selling themselves. So figuring out in the interview process what they're actually capable of doing and how interested they are in the job, right, by doing a little bit has been, it also helps with getting the team agreed on who to hire.
Got it.
So.
The flip side of the confidence, I feel like, is, and I know this because product people are kind of emotional people. And you don't realize it. Like, if you talk to a marketing person or salesperson, I have people come to me and say, hey, Gaurav, do you know any good companies to join? I said, what industry do you want to work on? What kind of company? They're like, I don't actually care. I just want it to be successful. I don't care if it's a storage company or enterprise software company. I'm like, wow, I care, right? This is really important to me. Product people are also kind of high maintenance. They always want to have the career conversation. What's next in my career?
Totally
right?
true.
Right? I mean,
yes.
I know this because I was like that too, right? And so you have to recognize that about them when you hire them, and really get to the core motivations. And so, for example, my most successful product managers were already in love with the product or fell in love with the product really quickly. So they used it before even the interview, right? And I asked them, are you in love with this product? Because you're going to be working on it night and day. Once you build that emotional connection, or they build that emotional connection, it also helps a lot with retention, right? Because they feel so invested in the success of the company that they're willing to go above and beyond, right? And that's what we're looking for when we hire product managers. There are 10x product managers. Like you talk about 10x software engineers. There's some product managers on my team that are doing the job of like 3 or 4 people, right? And that's just, I feel like they love the product. That's why.
That's great. That's fantastic advice. I mean, I think particularly when companies are just at that earliest phase of being able to assemble the team, some of this advice on loving the product, being very, very anal about everything that they see. I think that, I guess, good traits to be able to pick out for your product folks. Maybe just thinking about the evolution of not only just the hiring, but your own roles. Think about, just to be able to give the startups out here the perspective that you've had. How did your roles change over time when you went from that 10 million to that 100 million? And what were the biggest challenges that you faced differently at that later phase? Was it the hiring? Was it the recruiting? Was it it'd be good to give them the perspective of what they need. What were the biggest challenges that you faced versus at the earliest phases?
I can't keep up with what we're doing anymore, so that's either me getting old or we're doing more, because we have now 40-something product managers across all of our different products. I think the second thing is that my role has gotten, not just because I have strategy in my role, but my role has gotten more strategic over time, but the area of scope and ownership I have has almost shrunk because so I think the biggest thing, and that's been a really good thing for us and for me personally, I think the biggest thing that's changed is that our organizational structure in product and engineering and the overall company has changed and adapted so many times in the 5.5 years that I've been there that the say that the only thing that's constant is change has been really true, and being able to adapt, having the context of everything that I've been through and all the experiences that we had. We did that 3 years ago and it didn't work, or when we had this similar problem we did that, but really being able to adapt to the constantly changing role. And product people are, we have to swallow our pride very often, right? Because we put out imperfect products, and we know that, right? And we make trade-offs all the time. So I think I'd summarize that jumble of stuff if I could, but
it seems like an evolution, and just, you can't do everything like from the beginning. Well, maybe just because we're running short on time here just a bit, through your journeys and your your experience that you had, is there one takeaway that you'd love to tell startups that are going to be the next Box, that are going to be the next Elastic and Splunk, the next Zendesk? What's that one key thing you'd love to tell them from the product perspective? Ooh, I may have stumped some folks here. All right. Is there one single thing, or you can make it 1 or 2 things?
I'll go first because I'm closer to you. So next time I'll sit on the other side.
You can point that.
Exactly. I think that product management is a team sport, and even though it's product managers or product people's job to make the tough decisions, the more inclusive you are, the better decisions you're going to make, and the better they'll be socialized among your company and your customers. So don't take the burden of the world on yourself as a product person to make all the decisions. Like, socialize it and share it and get people involved in the process.
The way I think of the product function is that it's really a service provider to the rest of the business. And I think if you think about it, everything comes along. So you're a service provider to marketing, to engineering, to sales. Because one big mistake is people think that a product leader or product manager from one successful company is successful in another, and that's just absolutely false. the culture that between the two companies that I've worked at for the majority of my career is completely different in terms of product management. In fact, I hired no product managers for my prior company when I knew one, right? Because I knew, and not because they're not good. It's because I know the culture is so different, the way of operating, their expectations would be different. So, think about yourself as a service provider, and I think then the requirements of how to hire and how to run the group sort of come out of that.
Yeah, for me, I think that as companies get bigger, sometimes we lose the joy of building products because it becomes such a burden, right? And we also become ministry of no, right? So Aaron comes, can we do this? No. Okay, no, can't do that. Too much tech debt. No, can't do that. And I think what I'm trying to do today, more than ever, is to not say no, right? So taking the passion out of the business for someone like Aaron or Dan, who has so much passion around it. So we're going to do a hack day in a couple of weeks, and we're going to take a month and a half, and we might stop the entire thing to just implement a bunch of our hack day things, right? So it's those kinds of things which I think if you cannot lose the passion and the joy of building product along the way, that's really a big deal, because product management can become a pretty, kind of drudgery type function if you let it get there. So anyway, that would be my advice.
Got it. Well, it sounds like you got to keep the passion, got to find the way to yes. Well, everyone, please give a hand for the panelists here for this great discussion here. Thank you.